All right. So, hi everyone, and today we have Vu to help us present a paper which is recently uploaded to arXiv with the title "Fairness in Recommender Systems: Research Landscape and Future Directions." So, I think fairness in recommendation is a pretty interesting and rising research directions. So there are so many definitions of fairness at so many levels, at the individual level, at the group level. You can also do fairness for multiple stakeholders, right? In a different stage of your recommendation, starting from debiasing the model, or you can do re-ranking to maximize the fairness merit, or you can actually do some sort of perturbation to achieve fairness objectives. So to have us better understand the landscape of fairness in recommender system, so I think Vu will start to share with us about this new paper on arXiv. So Vu, take over and you can share your screen.
Sure. Share my screen.
Mm.
So, can everyone see the screen?
Yep.
The PowerPoint. Yes. Today I want to I would like to present about the paper Fairness in Recommender System: Research Landscape and Future Directions. So this paper is written by the group at University in Bari, Italia. So this is a pretty familiar group because we have covered some of the research, some of the survey done by this group on adversarial recommendation or multimedia recommendation. So this group is do a lot of work on surveying the landscape of recommender system, and now they focus on more aspect of recommender system, which is above the accuracy, like fairness or like adversarial robustness and privacy in recommender system. So because this group has done a couple survey on fairness on recommender system before, so the purpose of this survey is somewhat different from what they presented in previous research that they published. So this research they didn't really aim to establish a new taxonomy, or they don't really go through the technical details of the state of art algorithms like what they did in previous research. Instead, for this survey, the group of researchers, their aims is to point out the current issues with the approach, methodology, and evaluation of current research on fairness of recommendation system. And and uh, and and in this research, in this survey paper, the research group, they actually surveyed 160 papers on fairness in recommendation system, and they kept like do a statistical summary of what is the kind of fairness, and then the methodology and the evaluation steps that this paper employ. So the aim of this paper is to identify, like to point out like the problems we are having with the current research, and they from the issue they want to identify some potential research gaps that researcher in recommendation system field can tackle on and carry out further direction, carry out that further direction to come up with new groundbreaking research. So so this paper is pretty long. It's about 50 pages, and it covers 160 different journal articles and conference proceedings. So I would like to just give a brief summary of what their findings, so everyone can have a brief understanding of what is the current landscape and what is the future direction that they're proposing to us. So this is the diagram that they get at the end of the research of the survey papers. And from this diagram, they kind of like summarize what are being done in the field of fairness in recommendation system. And from this we can have a brief overview of what is lacking and what is being paid more attention and what is overlooked by the scholar in the field. So I would go from this chart first. So the author, they kept like explore the notion of fairness that being tackled, and they identifies that the most common notion being discussed in the field of fairness in recommendation system is group and individual fairness. And based on the statistic, we can see that most of the current research is being done in the group fairness, with 66% of the paper survey actually look into this notion of fairness, and the number of paper in individual fairness is much less, which is about like slightly more than 1/3 of group fairness. And the author kept argue that group fairness is easier to define in many settings, because for groups we just need to look into the sensitive or protected attributes of the users in the system. For while for individual, we probably need to come up with some kind of like distance metrics to determine the similarity between different user. So this is one of the reasons why like the scholar are leaning more to the group fairness settings, because it's easier to kind of like frame the problems, kind of easier to like run the experiment and evaluate the result. And now like the author also say that for accessing fairness in a multi-stakeholder system, which is gaining more attention from from fairness in AI field. Like when we come up with a research like considering fairness of different stakeholder is what like the trend in the trend in the industry. So the author also suggest that there should be more research that look into improving both individual and group fairness, as well as there should be more effort like look into like the problem in individual fairness in recommendation system. And
can I
yes,
comment here? I guess if you target the fairness as group level,
yes,
usually you have less constraints to deal with, right? Because
yes,
usually the number of groups is gonna be much smaller as compared to the number of individuals. So
yes,
from the fairness constraint point of view, if you just make sure that the fairness, the exposures, kind of base fairness for groups are similar, then you actually have less constraints for your optimization problem.
yes,
Whereas if you do it at the individual level,
yep,
then I guess naturally you have more constraints to
yes,
satisfy.
yeah. So
But
it's
then so
probably
about individual within one group, right? In which I just make sure that the individual among one group is fair. Like
yeah,
they have individual fairness in each group, right? And they
yeah,
don't really care about the group fairness, meaning that between the groups, maybe I don't really need to care about the fairness between them, right?
yep,
Yeah, but I guess this statistic, these numbers make some sense to the extent
yep,
that maybe individual level fairness is more challenging, and that's why considering or tackling the fairness at individual level is still less popular as compared to group level fairness.
yes. Yeah, you are right. I mean, and the author also like look into like the papers which target the individual fairness, and they also noticed that like many of the papers, they actually tackle like the settings that they're talking about, which is group recommendation. So they're not really tackling like, are not really aiming to build a system which is fair for everyone, but they aim to build a system which is recommend an item to a group, which everyone in that group like receive equal utilities. So with the field of individual fairness, there are a lot of literature in that field actually target like to solve the problems of group fairness, group recommendation. So
Yeah.
yes.
And maybe another reason is because I guess most of the recommendation system in industries are usually not really at individual level.
Yes.
So usually they do have customer segmentation where they actually do customer partition into groups, and then you have a special treatment for each of the group. So it also makes more sense to consider fairness at group level rather than at individual level, which apparently more expensive. Expensive both for the recommendation utilities point of view and also more challenging in the sense of achieving fairness objectives. Yeah, but individualized experience and fairness as well is something that they want to target. So I guess it's still an interesting question to pursue, which is fairness as individual level. So one follow-up question here is when they consider both group level and individual level fairness. So are these two fairness level are simply just based on utilities? I guess individual here means that we're talking about user, right? Not the item or the producer side.
I mean, this survey, they don't really go into the technical aspect or like the details of these. The what are the paper that they don't really mention what are the paper that dealing with most kind of fairness is like how they are framing the problems. But they did mention that like in like when you talk about the definition of group fairness and individual fairness is like it's like some kind of like opposite, it has some kind of like opposite notion, like it has some kind of like opposite objective between the two notions, because like when you are trying to make it fair for everyone and then you're trying to like make it fair between groups, so that it means that in certain groups there will be some individual which are not equally, which are not like like equal in all the attributes but receive equal treatment. So they're saying that because of the opposite nature of group and individual fairness, when we're framing the problem of fairness for both individual and group, we will have to face a trade-offs, and it's very difficult to determine like how to deal with the trade-offs, because there's no kind of like good definition of what is a good trade-off between group and individual level. So the author also mentioned that it's one of the reasons why researcher is not really like tackling these problems, because there's no mutual agreement on how we should frame the trade-offs.
I see. Interesting. Like, so there are trade-offs between these two fairness objectives. And it's not simply that if you can achieve fairness at individual level, then you can achieve fairness at group level, right? Like, because they actually measure in a different ways.
Yeah. So there's some kind of like conflicting nature in the two notions, and it's one reason. But the other did give like some kind of like citation on the paper on that tackling both group and individual. We can look into it like after this presentation to see like how they frame the problems and how they define
right.
an algorithm to carefully optimize for both group and individual fairness.
Yep. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. So I will go to the next chart, which is like not a lot, which just showing that like now like the attention is like is given towards both consumer and producer. So they say they're showing that there's like the most important stakeholder in recommended system is like taken care of. So there's a good balance right here, like in the literature. The next one is like the chart about the time horizon of fairness. So the author showing that like more than like 84%, more than like 80% of the paper right now is only looking at the looking at the static fairness, which means they only evaluate, they kept like come up with an algorithm and then they do applied experiment and applied evaluation. They only consider the fairness at one point of time, and then they don't really they don't really take into account of the feedback loop which happen when we run the experiment under dynamic settings. So the author also say that is a big issue right here, because he argued that recommended system is a very applicable is a very applied field, and most of the time the recommend system in practice it change with the customer feedback. So he is saying that the current method of doing experiments and evaluating the result is really disconnected from the real world setting, and
So this is something I also thought about. Like usually, like a lot of system now they adopt this sort of like bandit setting, or you know, like or contextual bandits to generate recommendation based on some policies. Um, so the kind of fairness here, like what we want to achieve should be in that kind of setting. Maybe it could be like stochastic bandits or contextual stochastic bandits. So likely it's going to be dynamic rather than static,
yes,
right?
and
But it's still there the re-ranking step that we can actually still intervene, right? Or we talk about some of the intervention or perturbation at the re-ranking step, so that so either you try to achieve fairness when in the feedback loop and learning loop, or you can also try to achieve that by the perturbation of the ranking of the items. So that is also another approach, and I do think either static or dynamic setting we can always do that in the re-ranking in the re-ranking phase. Do you agree, Phương? Like since you are working on something on re-ranking, fairness in re-ranking, so either dynamic or static setting of the recommender system, re-ranking is still a phase where you can actually do some intervention, make sure that the fairness objective is achieved.
I think you're on mute, Phương.
Yeah, you're on mute. A little bit short.
Yes, I totally agree with you, because from the paper I have read, you can easily train from dynamic or to the static, or in the other way, just by change how you define the fair from the selection, or maybe from the probability. You can define fair in the statistic, or maybe in dynamic you can achieve the fairness in the long way run. Because the sampling from some distribution and in the long way, they will be the same, quite the same with that distribution. From there you can achieve the fairness. So that's why I still believe in I still struggle with the rewriting problem from the Senate.
Yeah, actually, I'm having a question like, let's say if you try to build a model that is fairness aware, both at the training phase, right? Either in dynamic or static setting. And then you also have another effort of achieving fairness in the re-ranking phase. I would like to actually see what is the effect that it has on the final recommendations, right? So usually before what you investigate is how do you achieve fairness in a different phases of your recommendations? But why not do them together, like in both of the phases? Do we actually
Um,
obtain a
Usually, I see that they try to obtain fairness from uh, pair of methods like in pre-processing and in processing, or maybe pre-processing and post-processing. But I haven't seen any people talking about try to achieve the fairness in processing with the post-processing method. Because maybe because the nature of the post-processing, you give them some score and they try to re-ranking that. So somehow they will lose the fairness you try to give in the relevant score in the in processing method. So
yeah,
maybe the combination of
yeah,
two
my point is
doesn't.
that, if you actually know that you can still correct some of the Venice mistake in the previous phase, then you can actually tolerate some sort of error in the first phase and still have a chance to correct it in the second phase, in the re-ranking phase, right? It's different from the setting that in which you don't do Venice aware in just one of the phase, right? You assume that you will not do it in other step, right? So I'm thinking whether, if you allow the fairness method to be performed in different phases, like both in learning and then post processing, then is it something good in the sense that, in the first phase, you try to achieve fairness, but you don't need to do it aggressively. Like you can still tolerate some level of error, and with the belief that, the next phase correct the mistake that you miss in the first phase. Right. That is one of the question that I haven't really seen any paper actually consider achieving fairness in the two phases together.
I understand the question, but in that case, I'm wondering, do we really achieve benefit in the in processing? We might like combine the trade-off between the fair and the accuracy to give them some score, right? And we try to sorting that score and recommend the list in order of that score. So when we re-ranking again, can we know that what we the input of the problem in this case will be the score combination of both fair and the relevancy. It's like, can we see the trade-off maybe, or how we see the, like how we achieve the accuracy? Yes, in the ranking phase, we can see that I achieve some kind of fairness, but I can really see that how accuracy or maybe how the user really prefer my list. So I think it might be a good
Yeah,
question in the
yeah,
combination of two.
yeah. I would think that if you consider the dynamic of having two phases together, then there are some of the interesting questions that you can investigate and ask. because like at least we haven't really seen any paper that actually consider
In the dynamic setting, I think we can try to maybe put some kind of uncertainty in relevancy or maybe some distribution of session, like initiate the probability. We should select it from which decision and apply the re-ranking step based on both relevancy and the probability from the in processing methods. So we can combine the both intuitive of intuitive of fairness in processing method, which already give us in the probability maybe, and the re-ranking method. We try to balance between two objectives maybe.
Yeah, let's keep that idea in mind and revisit it soon. I think Vũ, you can continue with the next chat.
Yeah. To summarize, I mean, the other just want to show that there's a gap in the research where we consider the dynamic settings of recommender system, and they say that they would be more useful if we can have more work which like carry out like some kind of like A/B testing and not like apply, not just apply experiments and apply evaluation. That should be more like like the setting of the experiment and evaluation should be somewhat similar to like real world settings. So and then they just urge for like more research to be done with the dynamic settings of recommender system. And the next chart, I think the wording is a little bit confusing, like the cause of unfairness. So the author just the data is showing that like out of 160 papers that they examine, only 2 or 3 papers actually look at the fairness in a causal way, and most of these other papers they identify unfairness using like some kind of like associative metrics, which is like which also meant like correlation based metrics to identify unfairness. So it's I mean the wording here is a little bit confused. Associative metric of unfairness is like when they examine the data and then they are showing that from their calculation there's like certain groups of items or people is being favored, and then they can conclude that based on the data they see there's like certain group of movies is more likely to be in top case. While for like causal like when we use like the causal fairness metrics to get like address the unfairness problems, we most of the time we need to address unfairness under the methodology of counterfactual reasoning. So for the causal unfairness, the author they employ the causal counterfactual reasoning, which is like they create like hypothesis, like even like two similar user or two similar items with like owners with like everything equal. If they change a certain attribute, like a protected attribute, what will happen to the recommendation result? So it's a brief summary of what are causal and associative metrics, and the others say that there's very little research being done with the causal unfairness. Like most of the time, they only offer some associative fairness metrics, and it's really convenient, but like to look into the problems and try to understand fairness in a logic in a cause and effect in a more like comprehensive way. We probably need to look into the problem of causal unfairness more often. And the last plot here, the last graph here, the author kept summarize like what are the current what are the stage of recommendation system that the fairness enhancement process is being applied to. So we can see that most 60% of the work is currently, you know, lie within the in processing, which is like in the learning, the training, the modeling phase, and 34% is like in post processing. So the author didn't really, you know, go into the details of what are they doing with pre-processing. For in processing, he gave a brief summary, so it's pretty much what they expected. Like in processing methods, most of the time, the author would the author of the research, they would try to create a fairness aware objective function. So they try to incorporate fairness into the overall objective function of the recommendation system, or they can like frame the problems as a multi-objective optimization, or make the fairness become the constraint of their optimization. So there's like, you know, like a few like possible way that you can achieve fairness in the in processing methods. For post processing, like 90% of the work is focused on re-ranking, 95% of the work focused on re-ranking. So the author only briefly mentioned that, you know, post processing is like predominantly, you know, re-ranking algorithm, where we got the result and we just reshuffle the orders of the item in recommendation list in order to achieve the notion of fairness that they mentioned, you know, in the papers. So here's like a brief summary of the landscape of the field, and then the author, you know, like point out to us like, you know, a few areas that there's a lack of research that, you know, like tackle on. Like you can see here, like for individual notion of fairness or like dynamic setting of the recommended system, then the causal unfairness, as well as, you know, there's something that we can look into like pre-processing and then post-processing, like try to diverse like what we can do with post-processing methods, like other than re-ranking, what can we do? And then for pre-processing, like, you know, what would be like any like, you know, groundbreaking techniques that we can introduce that, you know, help the recommendation to be fairer. And additionally, here's just like a point that the author keep reiterates. So here's like some is what relate to the static settings of the recommended system. Like they just keep saying that like there's too many applied experiments and too many applied evaluation metrics, and a lot of the time, the fairness problems in the research paper seem to be an oversimplification, and they also like many authors actually equate the popularity bias with fairness, and all of these pointers, like, you know, like try to point to the point, like try to like, you know, point to the claim that the other, I'm trying to say that most of the work on fairness in recommendation system, they don't really, you know, have a clear definition of fairness that, you know, the community agree upon. Like they're saying that when we deal with fairness in recommended system, we haven't been able to come up with like a kind of like a standard for fairness. Like most of the time, like when we talk about fairness, we only like make some assumption about that. If an item is new, for example, like we make assumption like if like different group of movie being recommended, then it is unfair. Or like if a new item is being introduced to the system and more popular item still get recommended, is it unfair? But the other saying that it's not really, you know, it's not really unfairness in like it's not really unfairness, like because there's like no there's no like, you know, there's no kind of like definite like kind of like agreement saying that, you know, like popular item, more quality item should get more attention. So so I guess that what the author is trying to convey is that like there's no, you know, there's no like agreement, there's no moral standard on fairness of the recommended system right now, and and even when we are without that definition, we are still trying to, like when we deal with fairness, we are come up with so many notions, and we are come up with so many like artificial, like situation where we assume that there should be some kind of fairness to be addressed. Like
That's true. Like at least we actually, Phương and I also see one of the paper that
yes.
not talk about exposure-based fairness, but more like
Yep.
impact-based fairness. So it is really something that is about whether you have a good story to tell and convince. What would be the the basis of fairness? Is this based on exposures? Is this based on the utilities, or is it based on the impact or any other kind of the metrics? Which also brings a question like whether the authors actually discuss any approach that we as a community should follow to try to establish maybe like a standard definition.
Yeah,
Do they
I mean,
anything about that?
The author, right? They like, even though they say that there's no definite definition of unfairness in the recommendation system. They what they're trying to say is that in a regular settings is not 100% right when we equate like probability bias as unfairness, or it not 100% right when we assume that increasing diversity, like inclusion of less of new and less popular item with fairness is not 100% right. And then the others say that most of the fairness in the paper we're talking about are just like descriptive fairness. Like we are trying to show some kind of like associative metrics, so we and then showing that there's some kind of like imbalance in the distribution of exposure and in the distribution of relevance. Like what is like the policy here, and we just assume that there should be some like gold standard. There's some target distribution for fair exposure, but it just like what we assume. And then the others saying that like fairness should be based on what they're saying here is like normative claims. So normative claim is like the moral standard. So they're saying that there should be like fairness. The definition of fairness on the paper should be based on some kind of like morality that everyone in the society agree upon. So it's somewhat a very philosophical way to look at it, but they're saying that when they understand that fairness is there has not been an universal definition for fairness in recommendation system, but they're saying that like when we are introduce a new notion of fairness, we should discard the notion in a very particular way, in a very like what is the word, in a very like comprehensive way, and we should back up our notion of fairness with some kind of like normative claims, which is like the morality, the moral standard of the society that everyone should agree on. So I mean, here the author is trying to ask to go for a more like interdisciplinary look at the fairness. They're saying that there's so many works in fairness in social science, like in economics, in psychology, and then we should really like incorporate that point of view into like the definition of fairness. You're saying that like as of now, right? Fairness can be there can be different ways to look at fairness, but whenever we propose a way to look at fairness, we should be able to back up with like a very comprehensive discussion of why it should be fair. It should not like we come up with like some kind of like artificial like unfairness that we do, that we have like deduce from the analysis, and then we assume some kind of like gold standard for distribution of exposure or relevance. It should be looked at under more like systematic way. Like fairness should be the concept should be more well researched, should have like very thorough discussion to accompany with the definition of fairness that we examined in any particular papers. And he also saying that for different domain, different settings, there can be different notion of fairness, but you need to back it up with a lot of kind of like discussion and normative claims to make sure that everyone agree that it's not something like artificial, something that we just like deduce from the data analysis. It's something that everyone in the society will agree with is unfair, to let this happen. Yeah. So
It means like finance should be attached to some social support, like how people or how the community see as a finance, right?
Yes.
It's not some kind of like
Yep.
equal in the mathematics. It should like
Yep.
somebody a community recognize as the finance. So
Yes.
it should
Yes.
maybe
Yeah.
involve
So
some
the other
social
saying that.
experiment, right?
Yep, correct. So the other thing that we are doing so much applied experiment and so much algorithmic works, and most of the unfairness is just like based on like statistical varieties or like some metrics that we think about, and then we run and then test it. But the thing is, we don't really have a system of involve human feedback in the process of defining fairness. So they're saying that in one of the research that they quote, there's one cases when they actually improve and recommend a system to make it fairer. I think it's a job recommendation system to make it fairer for everyone. Like they kept like implement some kind of algorithm to like to make it more balanced. And when they involve the human factors into the in the study, they actually find that the people they prefer the previous recommended system. So that there's some kind of research that they carry on user study to see whether the fairness enhancement process is actually being valued by the user of the system.
Yeah.
So here I think here's the point that the author keep like reiterating iterating in the paper. Like they're trying to like make it clear that we should like have like thorough discussion of fairness in whatever settings that we're talking about, and it should based on some kind of like social norm, some kind of like moral quality that everyone in the society agree upon. I mean, it's difficult. It's very difficult to define, but yeah, it's what they are trying to argue here.
So I think maybe the fairness should be defined by the stakeholders, the one
Yes.
who involved in the system, and how they see that it's fair for them, maybe survey for them. I think that's maybe better than we
Yeah,
should.
so that is also important to involve human evaluation in this kind of research. So we also need to note down about the papers that actually perform human evaluation and actually learn about the methodology that they use to evaluate. And next time we work on this sort of fairness aware recommendation, we might need to design the survey for our human participants to evaluate, which I think it makes sense to involve human judgment as part of the evaluations, besides just the apply evaluation metrics.
Yeah, I mean, the other also said that is one of the main challenges that it's really hard, to get like quantify the impact that a fair recommender system actually bring about. Like we don't really, we're not being able to quantify the impact of the fair recommendation bring to the users and providers, and it's something that we should think about. Yes.
Another thing that I think it might be quite hard to reproduce the results because the fairness definition might fluctuate between the group of people. That's the first thing. And the second thing, because it involves the human interaction, maybe the results from this group might different from the other group. or maybe from the same person, but the answer may change from day to day. So the reproduce may be a problem if we involve some human interaction in this experiment.
Yeah, I mean it's very hard to, like, when we think about it, like, because human is not, like, human opinions might change over time, and it's not, something that is easy to reproduce, like, yeah. So I mean it is a very, like, high level question. Is
Mm.
I mean, it's a very high level, and then it's like the author is trying to ask for a more, like, interdisciplinary approach, when carrying out this kind of research. So it's really need to, we really need to, spend more time looking into this, and we probably need to consult experts from different fields, like if we want to, like, follow this direction, because the author, like, at the end of the paper, they also say that, like, in the end, they say that fairness in recommendation system, or, like, just like, other part, like interpretable AI is like a human computer interaction problems, and this kind of thing really need to carry out, like, just not just with our applied experiment and evaluation, but with a lot of human feedback in the loop, and with a lot of, user studies. So
Yeah,
it's one of the main conclusions.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we should move on, Vu.
Yeah.
You still have a lot of slides, right?
Yeah, I still have a lot of slide, but I kept, like, summarize on a bit into the first 3 or 4 slides. So the 20 other slide would just let more details. That if anyone has any other question, I can, like, briefly, like, skim through it. So and the author try, like, at the end, the author, like, summarize on the future challenges and direction that the thing we should, focus on tackling it. The first thing is, like, achieve a realistic and useful definition of fairness. Is like what I talked about just now. It's just, like, too many definitions, and for each paper, we will seem to have a different notion of fairness, because everyone see fairness in a different way and different settings, and and it is not a good thing, because, like, if there's too many notions, when we use one notion, I mean, for an algorithm, it might satisfy a notion, but if we change the notion of fairness, and then we change the evaluation metrics, it might not be fair anymore. So this kind of, like, variety is really hurts, like, the part when we're trying to, like, like, combine the literature and then the knowledge in the field, to build something bigger.
Right.
And right now they also say that there's, like, it's hard to find metric that balance between the performance of recommended system and fairness. Like, we don't really know, like, which is the gold standard for the trade-off between fairness and recommended system. And most of the time, we evaluate by seeing, like, a small drop in performance and a huge increase in the fairness metric. So it's something that we might think about, like, a way to, like, measure that trade-off. And then, like, the point that Phương talked about just now, like, an useful definition of fairness should have the human input and feedback, like, to the definition. Like, we should be able to to answer the question: is this the fairness that the user desires? And the author also say that it's fine, for, like, different field, different domains have different, like, notion of fairness, but we need to have the input from the people from that field, from that subfield, to have a comprehensive idea of, what should be the level of fairness, and then how we should define the fairness. And the second challenge that the author talked about is we don't have any data sets to assess fairness. So most of the data set being used is not specifically designed for fairness evaluation. And most of the fairness is, like, the interaction data is, like, meant for, like, optimizing the utility of the fairness system. And there's also, like, a lot of data sets which don't even have, like, some kind of protected or sensitive attributes. So most of the time, the researcher had to find a way to play around with it, and since is it not built for like fairness enhancement process, it might not be like the optimal like set of data that we use to test our algorithm. So they urge the researcher to collect data and then find a data set which is really optimal for building a fairness aware system. And the third point is like understanding fairness in reciprocal settings. So it's come to the part it's come to the I mean it's aligned with the trend in fairness in AI and machine learning, like because in a lot of systems there's a lot of stakeholders and when we optimize fairness is easy to fall in the trap that we optimize fairness for one parties and then reducing utilities for other parties. Like when we increase like for provider, we might decrease utility for user. So he urged for like a more comprehensive, reasonable definition for like the fairness in the reciprocal settings. Like we should define like fairness that we should have a fairness definition that serve both provider and consumer, or like in other recommended settings, it should serve like most of the party involved. So they're saying that this has not been like looked into like properly. Like we have a lot of research in like CP fairness, but the other saying that is still very fragmented. Like different paper might look at it like in different way, and we don't have any kind of like reasonable fairness difference in yet. So they urge us to look into like game theory, or like like cop behavior or non-zero sum games, like some kind of like game theoretic approach to solve the problem of reciprocal settings. And the last is like auditing fairness of algorithm. It's another area that we might look into. So here's like the 4 challenges and direction that the author kind of suggest us to look at.
So do they discuss anything about what should be the threats of the data set that can be used for fairness?
I mean, they just briefly mentioned about they don't have any specific threat, but they did have a part where they showing the application domain data sets, and then they're saying that most of the data set right now is like video and music, and movie land is like in over 1/3 of the research. And the other saying that for movie lands, right, there's not a lot of protected or or like a lot of protected or like sensitive attributes that we can tackle on. So is a very so when we do it, we make a lot of assumptions. We have a lot of we make a lot of assumptions about the unfairness in the data sets and all that, and then we have to kind of like we have to kind of like have I mean they're just saying that let's say like Amazon or movie lands is like really like the features, like the protected features that we want to look into. So and it most of the time, like what I said, the kind of unfairness problem here is just coming from kind of like associative metrics, something like that. And if we want to do like the causal fairness, it's very difficult to use like data sets like Amazon or like movie lands, because it's hard to argue that there's some kind of like cause and effect that lead that make like certain type of movie become more popular than others. So something like that.
So what is about the third point that they talk about, the reciprocal
reciprocal settings.
So
the reciprocal settings is they don't mention much about it in the paper, but they did talk about the notion of I think it's aligned with this slide where they talk about the notion of single side and multi-sided. Yeah, so they are just they have some kind of like plots to supplement their claims. Like most of the work right now is like single-sided and not really look into the problem of multi-sided, which is like fairness in the reciprocal settings. So when we deal with multi-sided, is a multi objective optimization problems, and different works have different approach. It's very fragmented, and we really need to figure out a way that define a fairness that satisfy like all the stakeholders and form that same definition for that like mutual agreement on definition of fairness. We can build up on like the problems of multi-sided fairness in recommended system. So I think it's just kind of like a paraphrase of this problem that the other talk about. And most of the work is just,
So this is the kind of question that we're also investigating. Like actually, Phương is doing something like this. Like we have so many fairness objectives that we can have, right? And they actually trade off between them. So if we can actually, investigate this kind of trade-offs between fairness dimensions, then we have a better picture of, even within the fairness dimension, we still need to set a certain level of balance between these fairness objectives.
Yeah.
Because once you optimize for one dimension, you might hurt the other dimension, and vice versa.
Yeah, so that I think this is the reason why the other also keep saying that about the importance of defining, I mean, by saying that there's by saying that there's what is the word here? By saying that there's a reasonable fairness definition. I think he meant that there should be a reasonable definition for the trade-offs. Like there should be a trade-off which is like everyone should agree upon, because the thing is, right, fairness is the thing is, right, in economics we can find a trade-off that serve both like supplier and user, right, like the demand and supply curve. So look like if we can establish such equilibrium, like he said, what I think they're trying to refer to the example of equilibrium in the markets. Like if we can find the trade-off that that at the point of equilibrium, then it is something that we should look into. That's why they talk a lot about like look at it into in the more like multidisciplinary way, and then try to like consult the game theoretic approach, like in economics, trying to find a equilibrium for the trade-offs. The trade-off that user and provider will be happy to be at.
Okay, yeah, good. So I also need to run to another meeting. So you feel free to continue, but I think I guess the main points of this paper, yeah, it's pretty insightful. Like some of the points we actually can relate to after a period of time that we work on this kind of topic, right? So we kind of relate to some of these points that they discussed. But also the important points that we should think about is that how did we actually think more about these challenges and see how we can shape our research agenda that actually fill in the gap that they mentioned here, right? Which is from the community perspective, we actually bring in something that haven't been done before, haven't studied before.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
which
agree.
which makes the research more significant. Right. I need to run
Yeah.
now, so but you two can continue if you want.
Sure.
Right. Have a great day. Thank you very
Okay.
much
Thank you.
for your presentation.